Support to people in lockdown across Greater Sydney. And a woman in her 90s has died of COVID in New South Wales as the state extends its lockdown for another 4 weeks. Queensland records one new locally acquired COVID case, raising concerns about a Brisbane backpackers hostel. The Northern Territory government has reached a $35 million settlement over mistreatment in youth detention centres. And another golden day for Australia in the swimming and rowing events at the Tokyo Olympics. Hello and welcome to ABC News Live from Brisbane. I'm Matt Wordsworth. The federal government has increased its COVID-19 disaster payment after New South Wales authorities announced a month-long extension to Sydney's lockdown. People affected by the stay-at-home orders will now get a maximum of $750. More businesses across New South Wales will also now be eligible for financial support due to the ongoing lockdown. 177 cases were recorded yesterday and tougher restrictions are now being brought in for Parramatta, Georges River and Campbelltown. We'll get the latest on that in just a second. But first to Jade McMillan in Canberra. Jade, welcome. Firstly, take us through the changes to income support.
Well, Matt, at the moment, anyone who is affected by the lockdowns across Greater Sydney can apply for federal government payments. If you've lost 20 or more hours of work per week, you can get a payment of $600. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has announced that from next week, that amount will be boosted to $750. Similarly, at the moment, if you lose between 8 and 20 hours of work per week, you can access a payment of $375. That will increase to $450. The Prime Minister has also announced that payments will be introduced for people who are already receiving some other kind of Commonwealth income support. For example, at the moment, if you're receiving youth allowance, you're not able to receive these COVID disaster payments. From next week, those people will be able to apply for payments of $200 per week. The Prime Minister has again rejected calls to instead bring back the JobKeeper wage subsidy that was introduced in the early stages of the pandemic. He argues that these COVID disaster payments are more targeted, that they're going to people directly affected by lockdowns rather than bringing back a national scheme as JobKeeper was. He also argues that this system is more efficient, that this money is going straight into the bank accounts of people who've lost work, that the rate depends on how many hours of work they have lost. And also, once you're approved for these payments, you don't need to keep reapplying. The money will continue to show up in your account until the lockdown lifts.
What we need now is the focused effort on where the need is right now. And so it can be turned on and off to the extent that we have outbreaks that occur. JobKeeper did not have that flexibility. It did not have that agility. Those payments that I mentioned, $411 million in New South Wales alone, businesses under that scheme would have had to have gone to their bank, borrowed that $411 million to make it available to their employees. In this case, we just acted and got the payments to them, in some cases, in half an hour of application. Now, that never happened. JobKeeper was a great scheme, but you don't play last year's grand final this year. You deal with this year's challenges. You deal with this moment's problems.
Yeah, costing $750 million a week. Jade, what about businesses in New South Wales?
So the federal and New South Wales governments had already introduced a scheme that provides support to businesses affected by these lockdowns. But the Prime Minister and the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, have announced today that that program is being expanded. It means that at the moment, businesses who've had a drop in turnover of at least 30% can access payments of up to $10,000 per week. That is being lifted to a maximum of $100,000 per week. The rate for sole traders will remain remain at $1,000 per week. And also with those business payments, the eligibility requirements are being amended so that more businesses will be able to access this support. The New South Wales Premier today said that this will be a lifeline for so many businesses across New South Wales who are struggling through this latest lockdown. The Prime Minister, or the extension of this lockdown, the Prime Minister says that the Commonwealth and the state governments are adapting as they go, that they are changing these support measures as this lockdown carries on and as people need that extra support.
All right, Jade, thank you. That's Jade McMillan at Parliament House. Let's go to Sydney now, where authorities announced another record in the city's outbreak. There were 177 new locally acquired COVID cases and one death. Our reporter Cecilia Connell joins us from Sydney. Cecilia, we'll get to the latest case numbers in just a moment. What did the Premier say about the extended lockdown first and the new measures?
Well, as was to be expected, the Greater Sydney lockdown has been extended 4 weeks till the 28th of August. This also includes the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast, Shell Harbour and the Wollongong regions. But the extended lockdown comes with a range of new restrictions. Probably the most significant of these is that another 3 local government areas have been added to that list of areas where people can't leave their LGAs unless they're authorised workers. So people living in the Campbelltown area, in Parramatta and Georges River now are not able to leave those LGAs unless they are an authorised worker. Now this brings those residents and suburbs into line with the restrictions that are already in place in 5 other LGAs, including Campbelltown, Liverpool, Fairfield of course, and Canterbury Bankstown. As well as this new restriction, other suites have been introduced as part of the extended lockdown we heard today. There's also a restriction now on people not being able to shop outside their LGA or within 10 kilometres of their home for essential items and shopping goods and whatnot. So this is in line with the same restrictions that are currently in place around exercising and leaving your home for exercise as well. As well as these, there's going to be a lift on the ban for construction around Sydney. So from Saturday, some construction sites will be allowed to operate, and this is if they're on construction sites that are not occupied. So people who are not living at those sites, workers will be subject to distancing requirements. There'll be 1 worker per 4 square metres. There's also other restrictions around tradespeople being allowed to residences where people are living, but there's strict restrictions in place around those as well. As well today, another restriction has been introduced or rather alleviated in terms of people who live alone. A singles bubble will be introduced to allow people who live alone to nominate 1 person who can visit them. Now this must be the same person, it can't change from day to day, and of course this is in line with the area in which they're living and of course won't include residents in the 8 LGAs that are under tighter restrictions, but people living within those LGAs can nominate a person living close by or within 10 kilometres of them.
I'm just so utterly disgusted, disappointed and heartbroken that people don't consider the safety and well-being of their fellow citizens. We rely on people not only to do the right thing, but not to openly threaten the health and safety of the broader community. I hope it won't be a setback, but it could be.
All right, Cecilia, what can you tell us about the new cases?
In terms of today's cases, Matt, 177 new cases were recorded in New South Wales to 8 p.m. last night. Now, this is the highest daily increase of cases since the current outbreak began. Quite concerningly, more than 100 of these are under investigation as to the source of infection. Of these 177 new cases, 46 were in the community for their entire infectious period, 22 for part of that period, and the isolation status of a further 62 cases remains under investigation. Sadly, there has been another COVID-related death in New South Wales. A woman in her 90s died at Liverpool Liverpool hospital yesterday. Health authorities are extending their condolences to her family. It brings the total number of deaths in this current outbreak to 11. There's currently 165 people in hospital, with 56 of these in the intensive care unit and 22 who require ventilation. Today's 177 new cases brings the total number of cases since this outbreak began to more than 2,500. Here's a little of what the New South Wales Chief Health Officer, Kerry Chant, had to say.
We're also recognising that the people of southwestern Sydney and Western Sydney keep our businesses, keep our city functioning. I've just got to say how critical the workers of southwestern Sydney and Western Sydney are. So we are continuing to see cases of workplace transmission in those settings, in those critical illness industries. And we are also seeing them take those infections back to their households and setting off other chains of infection.
And Cecilia, Year 12s will be able to go back to school.
That's right. So Year 12 students will be able to return to face-to-face learning from the 16th of August. That's alleviating a lot of anxieties that we've been hearing about for these students who are set to sit the HSC examinations quite soon. Now, a Pfizer vaccination program will be rolled out for Year 12 students living in the 8 LGAs of concern in the southwest and western Sydney regions. These vaccines will be redirected from regional New South Wales, and this is to ensure that these students don't potentially pick up the virus while they're at school learning and then pass it to their families at home. As we've been hearing, household transmission is one of the transmission chains that health authorities are particularly concerned about. Now, the Deputy Premier and Regional Minister for New South Wales, John Barilaro, said that the thoughts around this is that any outbreak that could impact regional New South Wales is likely to stem from the southwest Western Sydney outbreak. So the aim is to get as many people vaccinated in these areas as possible to prevent that spread to regional New South Wales. But of course, all eyes will be on those numbers over the next month to see if the curve will flatten. Yes, indeed. Cecilia Connell, thank you. Going to get more on the COVID situation in other states in just a moment, but first to another one of the main stories we're following out of Darwin this afternoon, where the Northern Territory government has reached a $35 million settlement with young people who claim to be mistreated while in youth detention. Kate Ashton is following the story for us. Kate, what is this settlement money for?
Yes, Matt. So the settlement is part of a long-running legal action that was launched in 2016. It was actually launched after Four Corners aired horrific footage of inside the Dondale Detention Centre and alleged that kids had been mistreated. It was brought on behalf of two young people who spent time both in Dondale, in Darwin, and in the Alice Springs Youth Detention Centre. What the lawyers argued is that these kids, during their time in custody, they were assaulted, they were kept in isolation, strip searched, and basically treated in a way that was not appropriate. And today we've heard that it has been settled between the NT government and these two young people. The class that will potentially be expanded to include as many as 1,200 people who've spent time in the Territory's youth detention facilities. Maurice Blackburn were the lawyers who ran the class action. They welcomed the settlement, but also said that potentially some of these people may not recover from their time spent in custody. We spoke with their principal lawyer, Ben Slade. Here's what he said.
We should not humiliate, degrade, deprive people of necessities, and certainly not children when they're in youth detention. And that's what happened for such a long time in the Northern Territory.
Kate, what happens next? When will that money start to flow?
So we've just actually heard from the Territory Families Minister here in the Territory, Kate Warden. She's responsible for the department that oversees youth justice in the NT. She said that money has actually already been transferred to a trust account for Maurice Blackburn, and then what we'll see is it go through the final court hurdles later this year. So it still needs to be signed off by a court, the federal court, where this has been happening, and that's due to happen in November. But as for now, what Maurice Blackburn will be doing is making sure that any kids who are in custody anywhere in the Territory, be that Dondale or Alice Springs, get in contact with them. It applies to people who spent time in custody between 2006 and 2017, and which we've heard is up to 1,200 people. So they'll be trying to get in contact with those people, and later in the year we'll see if the court signs off on that in principle decision. All right, Kate, thanks for the update. Kate Ashton in Darwin. The care worker charged over the death of South Australian woman Anne Marie Smith has pleaded guilty to manslaughter in an Adelaide court. 68-year-old Rosemary Maione was charged last year, 4 months after Miss Smith died from severe septic shock, organ failure, pressure sores and malnutrition. The 54-year-old was found in what police described as disgusting and degrading circumstances. Miss Maione will face the Supreme Court in Adelaide in September. Queensland recorded 20 new cases of coronavirus today, but only one was infectious in the community. The other 19 were found on a ship off the far north coast of Queensland. Reporter Emily Gremens joins us now from Brisbane. Let's start with the community case. What do we know about that? Are authorities concerned about it?
Good afternoon, Matt. Well, this is a West Australian man who had flown to Brisbane from the Philippines, undergone hotel quarantine here in Brisbane, and since then has been staying at the City Backpackers in Roma Street on the fringes of Brisbane CBD. Now, that backpackers hostel and an adjoining hostel have been placed into lockdown, and contact tracing is underway to find anyone who's been in and out of those two hostels. Now, obviously, any community incursion is concerning to authorities here, but this is just the latest case of someone who has become unwell after leaving hotel quarantine here in Queensland. Now, genomic sequencing will be underway to try and match that man's infection. That will help authorities determine exactly where he contracted the virus. But authorities, are becoming increasingly concerned about the incursions into the community here in Queensland. We've had 13 in the last 6 weeks. We know this man left hotel quarantine on July 17. The Health Minister, Yvette Darth, stepped through the timeline earlier this morning.
He had all of his tests while in quarantine were negative, however has become unwell. And had been tested on the evening of the 26th of July and has come back positive.
That's Health Minister Yvette Darth there. The rest of the cases are on a bulk carrier in far north Queensland. What's happening there?
Yes, this is a vessel that had entered Torres Strait waters and called for a pilot to come on board and help them navigate that quite tricky passage up there. And during that call disclosed that they had a number of crew members on board who were unwell. So instead of the pilot hopping on board, some nurses went over, tested the 21 crew members, and 19 of those people tested have returned a positive result. Now, these nurses were local, but they were wearing PPE. Authorities don't seem overly concerned about the risk to the wider community. Here's what Dr. Jeanette Young, the Chief Health Officer here in Queensland, had to say about this.
The ship didn't land there. No one came off the ship there, so it's not a risk to Torres, and we'll manage it very, very carefully when it goes around to Weipa.
So yes, that ship has been redirected to Weipa on the Cape York Peninsula. The plan is to have a couple of crew members staying on that ship, basically just to keep it safe while it's waiting off Weipa. And the sick crew are going to be brought to Brisbane to be treated and managed in the COVID-19 wards set up in hospitals here.
OK, Emily, thank you. So far, we've had no leaks off those kinds of ships, so that's good news. Emily Gremens, thank you for the update. Well, it's the first full day out of Victoria's latest lockdown, with 8 new locally acquired cases in the past day, all in isolation throughout their infectious period. But there was an extra case reported a short time ago. Reporter Stephanie Ferrier is in Melbourne.
Victorian health authorities are racing to track down the movements and close contacts of a young man who worked as a traffic controller at the Moonee Valley Racecourse COVID-19 testing site on Saturday and Sunday. Now, he started to feel symptoms of coronavirus late on Monday and went and got a test on Tuesday. Those results, that positive result, has just come in late this morning. Now, it's believed that he could have been infectious while he was working on the weekend at that drive-through testing site. They are still going through the early stages of his full interview. They don't know whether or not he was vaccinated yet, and as a traffic controller he would have only been required to wear just a general mask, not the full PPE that the other testers have to wear. They also have said that he wasn't required to have any regular surveillance style testing to see whether or not he was positive to coronavirus before that as well. And this is what the Health Minister, Martin Foley, had to say about the latest case.
The site has been closed. All the staff who have worked on the same shifts have been sent home to isolate and to be followed up. And our pathology team are identifying, in fact, if there were any positive cases who went through that testing centre during the period in which the person worked.
The risk to individuals coming through in their cars is extremely low, really. But if you've wound down your window to speak to a traffic controller at that site, that might put you at a slightly greater risk.
That was Professor Brett Sutton, the state's Chief Health Officer there, and he said that this just goes to show that despite our lockdown lifting, this outbreak is not quite over yet and people need to still be on their guards, including making sure that they still use the QR check-in code system so that if we have any new cases, then the health authorities can really quickly identify people who have been to key exposure sites. In the meantime, lockdown was over and this really brought a spring to the step of many people who were out and about this morning, enjoying going into the cafes, enjoying going into the shops once again. And we spoke to some of the workers and in fact one of the barbershop workers who said that at least we weren't having to deal with the effects of a long lockdown.
I haven't seen any home lockdown haircuts yet, but they're always pretty funny to see, so yeah. But we'll see, you never know. But it's been great.
I think the idea of a bookshop is that you come in looking for one book and you accidentally leave with 4 books. And that's really what I hope happens from now until the end of the year, really.
We've got some great locals around here that have really helped us out and really, stuck with us through the hard times. So it's been really good, seeing them every day still and having them come and support us.
But despite the lockdown lifting, some restrictions still remain. We'll be banned from having visitors to our homes for at least the next 2 weeks. Public gatherings will be limited to up to 10 people. And we will also be forced to wear our masks both indoors and outdoors as well. There'll also be those strict density limits on retail and hospitality. And to that end, the Victorian and federal governments have announced a joint financial relief package totalling $400 million. $85 million of that will go towards small business grants of up to $5,000 for companies that have a turnover of up to $10 million who've experienced a 70% hit to their revenue. There'll also be money on offer for cafes, for businesses like the ones that we saw that cannot actually remain viable while they have to deal with those strict density limits as well. And the cost of this rescue package will be shared equally between both Victoria and the federal governments.
Americans living in COVID-19 hotspots are being advised to resume wearing masks indoors, even if they are fully vaccinated. The mask advice was lifted for those vaccinated back in May, but the US Centre for Disease Control says it's now been revised. The updated guidance states that in public indoor settings, everyone should wear masks to prevent the spread of the Delta variant. That includes students and staff at schools from K to 12.
We're dealing with a virus that's a wily character, if you want to make a metaphor out of it. It's one that when the CDC made that recommendation 60 days ago, you were dealing with the Alpha variant, which is very different than the Delta variant we're seeing now.
President Joe Biden is also expected to announce tomorrow that all federal employees and contractors will have to be vaccinated or submit to regular testing. Officers who defended the US Capitol building during January's riot have asked an inquiry to pursue those responsible. Their testimony opened a congressional committee examining the storming of the building by supporters of former President Donald Trump, actions which left 4 dead. Officers who battled the mob said they feared being killed and were racially abused by rioters. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn says he and his colleagues did what was necessary on the day to protect democracy, and now those in Congress must do the same.
Us 4 officers, we would do January 6th all over again. We wouldn't stay home because we knew it was going to happen. We would show up. That's courageous. That's heroic. So what I ask from you all is to get to the bottom of what happened.
Indonesia has reported more than 2,000 deaths from coronavirus in the past 24 hours, a record daily total. The number of confirmed infections also spiked to 45,000, while only 7% of the population has been fully vaccinated. Indonesia is considering offering a 3rd shot of its main vaccine created by Sinovac after data showed antibodies provided by the 2-dose jab fade after 6 months. A Roman Catholic cardinal who was once a close ally of Pope Francis has told a trial in Vatican City he remains obedient to the Pope. 73-year-old Cardinal Angelo Becciu is accused of misusing church funds in a ruinous London property venture and is the most senior cleric in modern times to face trial for alleged financial crimes. He is charged with spending more than $560 million of church money on a botched deal to buy a property that incurred huge losses. He denies wrongdoing. Australia has swept several gold medals at today's Olympic events, among them swimmer Ariarne Titmus, who has won her 2nd gold medal of the Tokyo Olympics with victory in this morning's 200 metres freestyle final. Fans at her old school in St Peter's Lutheran College in Brisbane were out in force, skipping exam prep to watch the historic swim from the Performing Arts Centre. Lexi Hamilton-Smith was there and got caught up in the post-race excitement.
Well, Olympic history being created, and I'm at Ariarne's school, St Peter's in Brisbane, and look at everyone. They were so excited. How do you feel about Ariarne? Now, I've got some fellow swimmers here. Now, you swim with her. How did you feel about the race? I mean, she almost didn't get there.
Oh, she trained so hard, and we knew she'd come home hard. And yeah, it was such a great race. I'm so proud of her. So happy for her as well.
And you're a swimmer too. How did you feel as you watched her, particularly that last 50 metres?
No doubt. I knew from the very beginning she was going to win. Even if she went out slower than the others, she was going to bring it back hard.
And how exciting are you guys, the school captains? What's your war cry?
We love you, Arnie. We do. We've been singing a lot today.
And how did you feel? I mean, you know, we were just sitting there, not breathing almost.
I mean, I didn't have the confidence that Josh had. I was nervous, properly nervous. But yeah, to see her come back, my heart's beating hard now. No, she did amazing, so inspiring, so exciting. The energy in the room is just crazy right now. Everyone's on a high. It's awesome.
She is an Olympic champion. She's beat Ledecky now. It's just incredible. In 2 races, there's another one to come. You know, how do you describe her? They call her the Terminator.
It's hard to find the words to describe her. Just to think that she would have been one of us sitting in this room, like one of us, and then all her training and hard work has paid off to such a level that she's an Olympic champion, a legend on the world stage. To pull that off is just insane.
So she really is an Olympic hero to the nation, and certainly a hero here at St Peter's, her old school. So let's hear that war cry. Come on, guys, let's hear it again.
What do we think about it? She's all right. I said, what do we think about it? She's all right.
Yeah, imagine what happens when she gets back to school. Well, a quick look at the national weather now with Jenny Woodward.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. Well, it was a rather extraordinary sunrise this morning at Currajong Beach at Shoalhaven in New South Wales, and hard to separate the sky from the ocean and the land. Thanks very much to Jane for the fabulous photo. But today it's all about the winds, with severe weather warning in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. Already in South Australia, a gust of 107 kilometres an hour on Kangaroo Island. And in Victoria, St Kilda's measured 93 and Mount Buller has picked up 115. There's heavy rain and snow in the alpine areas today as well. And you can see on the satellite photo that that's the main area of activity in terms of shower and some storm activity, and we've got some weaker showers going through parts of Victoria. Very cold air mass follows as well. But if you look at the chart, that's all due to this high pressure system which is moving in behind the frontal system. We might see some showers moving all the way up to the border between Queensland and New South Wales this afternoon, perhaps some storms around the southeast corner of Queensland, but then fine weather will settle in before the next trough arrives, and very hot air mass coming in ahead of that, and we'll see those temperatures bump up. Not a huge amount of rain coming through. Certainly West Australia will get a decent drop and there'll be lighter falls coming through, but most of it is skimming the southern coastline. Let's check forecast now, and sunny for most of Queensland tomorrow. Just a few showers about the tropical coast and also the southeast coast. There might be a storm in the early hours. In New South Wales, we've got showers about the northeast quarter of the state and also about the southwest slopes, falling as snow above 900 metres at first. Sunny through the west of Victoria, but showers are possible otherwise, but they're more likely to the south. And there'll be some storms too, bringing gusty winds and small hail, also some snow down to 900 metres by evening. We'll see some showers about the western parts of Tasmania, also the far south and the Bass Strait Islands, possibly some hail about as well, and snowfalls to around 700 metres. Early storms are possible in the west as well. For South Australia, cool early with some frost patches, morning fog areas about the inland parts of the Eyre Peninsula and also in the northwest pastoral district. Showers near the southern coast and ranges. Showers tomorrow, southwest of a line from Exmouth all the way down to Israelite Bay. Possibly some thunderstorms in the far southwest corner as well. And we'll see windy, squally winds over that area as well. But it'll be fine to the north, but we'll see some fog areas right across the top end. And we'll see winds picking up to the south, a top of 29 in Yulara.
You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. Areas of New South Wales currently in lockdown will continue with restrictions for another month, with a woman's death and 177 new locally acquired cases recorded today. New rules include limiting movement for shopping to 10 kilometres from your home. The New South Wales government is also considering a singles bubble for people who live alone and rapid antigen tests for some essential workers. Further financial support will be offered to people in lockdown across Greater Sydney. The federal government's COVID-19 disaster payment is set to be lifted, and help will also be provided to people on welfare. Queensland records one new locally acquired COVID case. The man had travelled from the Philippines to Brisbane and had completed hotel quarantine on July 17th. He's been living at the Roma Street City Backpackers in Brisbane, with authorities now tracing other guests. And swimmer Ariane Titmus has won her second gold medal of the Tokyo Olympics with victory in the 200 metres freestyle final. The 20-year-old beat Hong Kong's Siobhan Jorge in an Olympic record, with Canada's Penny Oleksiak third. Australia also had victories, winning gold and bronze in the rowing events. Today's confirmation of a month-long extension to Greater Sydney's stay-at-home orders is a bitter pill to swallow for millions of people now into their 5th week of lockdown. That's 9 weeks all up by the time August 28th rolls around, and even then there's no guarantee the outbreak will be contained by that date. It was 6 weeks ago today that the first case appeared in Bondi. It took 9 days for Greater Sydney to go into lockdown. Here's a look back at how events have unfolded since then.
From 6 p.m. today, all of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast and Wollongong will go into a lockdown.
What we're seeing is by the time we've got there and uncovered these chains of transmission, we have had a number of people infectious in the community.
This Delta variant is a different beast. It's outrun the contact tracers.
It's like we've got everything under control and then all of a sudden, what happens, bam, we're hit.
It's getting a bit stressful now, actually.
Last year, it was very clear, but this year, it's confusing.
I don't want to regret what I'm about to say. We had anticipated potentially a surge in cases by today. Our fears about huge escalation haven't materialised, and we certainly want to keep it that way.
Because of the lockdown, the exposure sites are really shifting.
And if everyone just locks down, stay inside, do what you need to do, then I'm frustrated that it shouldn't have got to this point.
There isn't anywhere on the planet that's managed to live with this variant of the Delta virus without having a proportion of their population vaccinated.
New South Wales has to eliminate the virus from the community before opening up again.
The numbers aren't going in the right direction. That's pretty obvious to everybody. The message I'm delivering today is quite shocking for a lot of people, but I need everybody to be shocked.
We never know, it could get worse and worse every day.
I can't see how we'd be in a position to ease restrictions.
It's unbelievable. The whole world is turning to the opposite way. We are suffering severe consequences.
That number of people being infectious in the community keeps going up. You cannot leave for work in those local government areas until July 30.
My community is hurting. My community is hurting, and now they're going to be hurting even more.
Certainly a downturn, mate. No income coming in at all, and trucks to pay and machines to pay.
If we want to get out of this thing and have a normal life, we need to quash it, and that's why those extra measures were put in place.
We are seeing more hospitalisations, more admissions to ICU, more people on ventilators.
Case numbers will continue to go up before they start coming down, and we need to brace ourselves for that.
I have advised the government today that this is a national emergency and requires additional measures.
I think it's the worry of, will I still have a job at the end of all this if lockdown goes any longer?
From today, the New South Wales government will be calling on the federal government to refocus our national vaccination strategy.
We are not going to disrupt the vaccination program around the rest of the country.
We have a continuing and growing problem, particularly in southwest and western Sydney.
We need money to pay the rent and to buy food and check clothes and yeah, we need to survive.
If I lose my business, what am I going to do?
This selfish, inappropriate behaviour is what is going to continue this city into lockdown.
I am worries about my kids. My wife also is not happy. Very hard to. It's a challenge time, I think, my time.
Let's get more on today's changes to business and personal financial support amid Sydney's extended lockdown. Kelly Fielding is the owner of 4 Wicked Inc. studios across Sydney and Goulburn, and she's worried about the impact of the extended lockdown, not only on her business but on her staff, and she joins me now from Penrith. Kelly, thanks so much for your time today. I know it's a difficult time for you and your staff. How are you faring during this lockdown?
Considering I've had my cry for the day, so we're okay. Being in the 75,000 and over category leaves you with only one option, and that's the business grant. So the business grant is supposedly 15,000. I've received 10,500, which doesn't really help considering my base payments are 11,000 per week. That's my rents, my wages, things that you have to pay before your electricity bills, before all the other additions come in. So I've now just spent about 55 to 60,000 of my savings in the last 5 weeks. When we get to the 9-week mark, it will be over 120,000 that I will have lost. And I'm not entitled to any personal support. I'm not entitled to the disaster payment. I'm not entitled to any micro grants. I'm not entitled to any weekly payments. So just the straight, I've received the 10,500 when I'm 60,000 in the hole. Last time when the 3 months...
So basically it has to rely on you going out of business and then getting the welfare payments before you can get any help.
But, I was lucky enough to have a lot of savings last time this happened, and I went through $132,000. So...
Did you get JobKeeper last time? Did that help?
Yes, but it doesn't. When when your expenses are running every week to the tune of $11,000 to $15,000, what does $15,000 do? Do you know what I mean? I just finished paying back $32,000 in back rent from the last one. So I don't understand. Like, I even tried to do the JobSaver this morning, which is a ludicrous. So they're saying JobSaver is a support, but it's only a subsidy for your wages. So they're going to offer you 40% of your wages. So that comes in at $1,900 for me. But considering that my expenses are between $11,000 and $15,000 a week when I add on all my extra ones that come in, $1,900 is not going to do much.
Yeah, and of course you don't have the customers right now, do you?
No, we've got nothing. And considering when you look at the tattoo industry, and this is what I've tried to get somebody to hear me, we have on average probably 10 to 12 customers a day actual appointments. So our exposure to different people is not what 1,400 people shopping at IKEA is. And I understand and it will, and all of the necessities. And I'm so sick of hearing essential workers are the only people that should be out there, because what is more essential than all of us not being able to actually earn a living anymore? Like, I've got nothing. Like, there's been no personal support. I love when I hear Gladys say, and a lovely woman, and I think she's doing a great job, but I think her hands are tied and there's not enough money. So I've got no support for my household, nothing. So I'm not entitled to anything.
So how much longer can you last, Kelly?
Last time I borrowed a bit off my dad, and I'll probably be doing that again. Yeah, I ring my accountant every day, and poor Nick from Alpha New, he cops me. He said he's got so many people. I'm not the only one. There's he gets 20 to 30 calls a day from people saying, "What are we supposed to do? We're not going to get through this." So that's only one small section of us. How many more are out there that are just and there's no one to talk to? I make a joke and I write to Gladys every day on her site, and I say to my dad, it's like my diary. Dear diary, this is happening, because nobody gets back to you, nobody listens, and they don't care, because there's no feedback. There's no study of our industry to see whether we're safe or whether we're not safe. I mean, knowing that in our particular case, our cross-contamination, our barrier protection is incredible. There's no reason, I believe, to stop 11 people coming through our doors so we don't go under. Yeah. I don't understand. And the more you hear from the studies, they say that the lockdown is not the answer. I think there's certain issues to it that I think maybe do help, but as a whole, to close people's livelihoods and to stop anyone being able to support themselves is not the answer.
Well, I'm sorry you're under so much pressure, Kelly. It must be a terrible feeling. What do you think needs to happen? What's your message to Gladys Berejiklian and Scott Morrison today?
Well, the one thing I was thinking is if they actually had a panel of experts that would sit down with all of the different organisations, leaders, and find out what our organisations actually do to find out if we are a risk, if we can put COVID plans together. It's like they've obviously sat down with the construction industry and they've probably worked out how to keep their people safe. So to not even listen, to not even realise that you've left a big hole in your support. So anyone that goes and has a job will get there. Now it's $375 if you've lost a day, and it's $750 if you've lost an entire week of work. I get nothing, not a cent. How does that even make sense? I've got 3 children, I'm on my own, and we have no income coming in now. So the $10,500, because it's not $15,000, they actually have to make us work for that. I have to reapply and tell them why I need it. So we're not getting $15,000 at all. And yeah, I've been turning over about $11,000 a week, just trying to stay on top. So where is the support for small business?
Yes,
individuals within us, the minute you have a small business, there is no individual support.
Yes, and of course you are an employer, so obviously I hope that the powers that be are listening to stories like yours, because as we all know, small business is the engine room of employment. Yeah. So Kelly, I really appreciate your time today, and I hope this lockdown ends sooner rather than later for your and your staff's sake.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Kelly Fielding, owner of Wicked Ink Studios.